This is our second annual conversation on inclusion. And what is it about? Does anyone know? Or are they just being told to be here for a class? That doesn't really matter. It's good that you're here because it's a good opportunity to learn about immigration in the workplace, which is our theme this year. It's also a good opportunity to meet some fine people who have been very successful in their endeavors in this country. So let me introduce Dr. Eisler, our esteemed president of the university. Dr. Eisler.
Thank you, Dr. Woolen. Thank you for being here. One of the most important things as a student is to attend events like this. There's so many opportunities for you to learn outside of the classroom. So I salute you for being here, and I hope you'll find this will be an evening that you'll take much from. I'm very grateful for the faculty members of the committee that put this evening together. I know how hard they worked, and I want to express my appreciation to each of them for assembling this panel and assembling this evening and making all the arrangements so that we could have wonderful food to eat and this opportunity to hear from this remarkable panel. I had the opportunity to meet our panel earlier. They're really, truly amazing people, and it's truly an honor and a pleasure to have them on our campus. Could we thank them for being here? If you think about this, and if you look back in your own personal history, most people in this room, at one time your family immigrated to this country. So this is experience that someone in our ancestry had. And to think about people coming to this country as immigrants and then becoming entrepreneurs, because not only did they have to master the culture, the language, all the idiosyncrasies of our country, then they needed to come up with that innovative, clever, thoughtful idea that the public would support and that was a marketable idea for them. So the idea of being both an immigrant and an entrepreneur is something that I find extraordinarily exciting in terms of our panel tonight. I'm especially interested in immigration, and Bing and I have had these conversations on numerous occasions. One of the challenges Michigan and the Midwest has is we don't have enough young people. And there's going to be a real shortage of workers, of employees for our companies and our industries and our businesses. And that's because in Michigan, our birth rate has declined. And so the only way that we're going to be able to meet the needs of our state, to grow our economy, create the kind of Michigan that people want to live in the future, is if we encourage more people to immigrate to our state so that we can build our population and build the number of young people here. So I'm especially excited about this program. I really look forward to hearing to our panelists. Thanks so much.
I'd like to introduce the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Paul Blake.
Thank you, Jim. And good evening, everyone. I was asked to talk a little bit about last year's program. Before I do that, I want to, like President Eisler, thank the panel for being here. It is a very, very esteemed group, and I'm very, very much looking forward to hearing them talk tonight. But what I'd also like you to do is, even though you don't know all of them at this point, I would really appreciate a round of applause for Kathy Brower and all of the people who've been part of her committee to organize this during its second year. This evening, to my mind, is probably fast becoming the one or two very, very best forums that we have on this campus during the academic year. So I think you'll be very, very pleased with what you hear tonight. When I think about last year, I think about clarity primarily. I think about the fact that I sat here last year listening to people talk about their careers, listening to people talk about their challenges and the kinds of commitment and energy that it took for them to achieve what they achieved. And I think you're going to hear that same kind of thing tonight. I remember very, very vividly as a child growing up in a very, very old house, and particularly in the winter, lying on my bed reading, hitting that point that some of you may get, and that you get tired, your eyes get tired. so your mind begins to wander a little bit. And I remember looking out the window, and there are only going to be people my age who are probably going to remember this, but if you remember looking through the old leaded windows, that if you looked here, you got a little bit of a blur. It was like looking through gasoline fumes, and you had to move over here to see something with clarity. And I think that's what this panel, this forum has done for me last year, and what I hope that it will certainly do and expect it to do tonight. It provides an opportunity to look through the window just a little bit differently than you looked through it the last time, with a little bit more clarity, a little bit more perspective. And given that, again, I thank all of the people involved in organizing and implementing this evening. Have a great evening, and look through the window a little bit differently. Move your head about. I think you're going to see lots of very, very interesting perspectives. Thank you.
I have the honor of introducing one of our student ambassadors who is going to give you a reflection on her time.
Hi guys. Alrighty, so my name is Chelsea Fraley, and as Jim mentioned, I am the current president of the College of Business Student Ambassadors, where our goal is to help you guys just network with the faculty here as well as other students, and I'll just kind of focus on your strengths, because the strengths are what's most important. So if you have any questions, feel free to speak with me. However, for tonight's event, just coming together for this panel discussion with our industry leaders is the concept of diversity and inclusion as presented to our students at the college and of our university campus. The logical extension is to expose students like you and me and staff and faculty to diverse perceptions from external resources. Employers' perceptions regarding diversity are constructs that we will need to understand in order to be effective leaders as we enter into the career force and in a corporate environment. The format of this event, as you can probably see behind me, includes a discussion panel sharing diversity and inclusion practices by each respondent's corporation, followed by a question and answer forum from you guys in attendance. Although our target is college students, we have opened it up to the general public as well in hopes to just get everyone to participate. Thank you guys, and I hope you enjoyed this event as much as I did last year.
Just a note on the cards, if you have a question and you write it down, pass it to the center. We have people who will be collecting them. So please, if you have, when I say the center, this is the center right here. So pass your cards if you have a question you want to ask any of the panelists. Please do so. In hearing Dr. Eisler talk, I'm reminded of one of the most well-known presidents in this country, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who, when he addressed the Daughters of the American Revolution, started out with "my fellow immigrants." So as Dr. Eisler said, we are all immigrants in one fashion or another, at one point or another. So with that, I would like to introduce our panel. And they're going to be alphabetically instead of left to right or right to left. Bing Gui, and he is the CEO of Easton Floral and the current chair of the Michigan Office of New Americans. Raquel Salas, who is an attorney, co-founder of the Avanti Group, and a lot more. Thank you. And Sri Thanadar, who is CEO of Avamine Analytical Services, and he is a current Michigan gubernatorial candidate. Also, I'd like to introduce the moderator, Dr. Jimmy Joseph.
Dr. Woolen, thank you very much. So the format for this evening is that I am the moderator. This is about you and your questions, getting information that you want to have about immigrants and entrepreneurs in the workplace. And why are we doing that here at Ferris? Ferris State University was founded in 1884. And I'm going to read you something that was written by the founder, Woodbridge and Ferris, but could have been written in 2017. And I'm going to read it because it's a quote that I couldn't have come up with. My plea in Michigan, and it will be my plea to the last breath I draw and the last word I speak, is education for all the children, all the men, and all the women of Michigan, all the people in our states, all the time. A quote from a person at a time when the Civil War had just ended, when some states still had bounties on Native persons, when women could not vote. Education for all the people in our states all the time. That is our founder. We didn't come to the concept of inclusion of the people in Michigan last year, last decade, last century. That is what we're founded on. And with that, I would like to bring us to our panelists and our first question. What obstacles did you run into trying to start a business here in the United States that might have been different in other places?
I'll start, if that's okay. I remember when I first started my business, I started out of my one-stall garage and took my experience working for a local wholesale floral company. And, and as I began to look at how I could improve that service by starting my own business. After a year, I was fortunate enough to have been able to grow, and I went to the bank. And at that time, like I say, I remember this, even though it happened in the early 1970s. I remember having to sit in this conference room, and 3 bankers comes into the room. At that time, they were predominantly white male, and these were 3 white male bankers, and said to me, there's too much competition in your industry. You need to work for someone because you'll never be successful as a business owner. I tell that story because I do believe that the biggest challenge that immigrant business owners, or what I consider business owners who are not part of the majority culture, have to overcome is the perception that we are less than capable. And in the 1970s, that's probably even, well, I won't even say that's even worse then than it is now, because I think all of us can tell you stories of fellow entrepreneurs who face even that perception in 2017. So I think the biggest challenge that I had to overcome is the assumptions that the majority culture have about those of us who are considered quote-unquote minorities. And that can be across the line of ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, and all the other divisions that society has placed within the context of where we live and how we live our lives here. So again, I think the biggest obstacle that I had to overcome was being able to approve and being able to overcome the perceptions that leadership had about people who look like me.
In my experience, it was a little different. It's not necessarily has been the experience based on opening a business itself, but as a professional. I am a criminal defense attorney, and I represent a lot of minorities. And for some reason, when I go to a new court, and when I say new court, it means that in my jurisdiction, which is Kent County, because of the years that I've been practicing, I know everybody and everybody knows me. But I go quite some time to Detroit, St. Joseph, a lot of counties outside of the county that I work with. And if I have a client who is Spanish speaking and I go to court, I am the interpreter. There has not been one time, even today, that they greet me as if I am the attorney. They always think and assume that I am the interpreter, which is quite interesting because I'm already got used to being called the interpreter, and I take a lot of pride when I said, oh no, I am the attorney, because their face is amazing. So that has been my biggest challenge, and it continues to be my biggest challenge, because every time I go to a court, and it's a new court and the client speaks Spanish, they will assume that I'm the interpreter. And it is because they're expecting an interpreter to show up. But it seems that they're not expected to see an attorney that is Latino that is going to be the attorney in the case.
Well,
My name is Shri Tanidar. I came to United States in 1979, the month of February. They told me it's going to be cold in America. I couldn't go to Google and check out what the weather was in JFK back in 1979. So I came in with my sweater, and it was minus 10 degrees at JFK. Got my PhD in '82. I then went to University of Michigan, did my postdoc in chemistry, started my business in 1990. I had no idea on what to start, and my biggest challenge, so I went to the Yellow Pages and looked for chemical-related businesses where I could work and eventually buy that business. And I found a 3-person lab that solved tough chemical-related problems, and I got a loan from the bank for $50,000. The owner took back a note for $25,000, and I had $3,000 on my credit card. So the biggest challenge was within me, trying to say, I didn't come from a business family, and I had a very secure job, and to leave all that and jump into something with so much uncertainty and unknown. And I had to fight with that, and my family, my wife, I had to convince everybody, and I knew I'm going to succeed, but sometimes I had to cut my projection down to half just so that my wife and my friends would believe me.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are, of course, part of the College of Business in terms of the Inclusion Committee, so we have a lot of students interested in entrepreneurship. What is the climate for entrepreneurs in Michigan? Because, of course, you've traveled all to other states, you've seen climates in other areas. So what would you say is the climate for entrepreneurs in Michigan, and what is the climate for immigrant business owners in Michigan?
I think, go ahead. So I ran a small business. I started my business in Michigan in 2010. I had built up a lot of large business, and it got all demolished in the recession. The bank came and possessed my entire business that had about $65 million in revenues and 450 employees. And that business suffered in the recession, and Bank of America had no mercy. They came in, took all that, sold it all, got themselves paid in full. And my wife and I put all of our assets in a budget rental truck. A day before our home was to be foreclosed, we drove that truck all through the night. And next day I found a little rental space that used to be a lab and also had gone out of business. And I rented that space and restarted my business in 2010. Then grew the business really rapidly. And for the third time last year, I won the Entrepreneur of the Year award from Ernst & Young. So it's been a challenge, but the biggest thing about is finding skilled employees. And a lot of times the employees that I hire, these people have moved out of Michigan. They're originally from Michigan. So I was able to bring a lot of people back to Michigan because they found employment. Because I'm a science-based, and it's, half of my staff is PhDs in chemistry. And a lot of times I had to rely and be able to attract immigrants. So I brought a lot of immigrants to Michigan, to Ann Arbor, and brought a lot of ex-Michiganders who had moved out to come to Michigan.
I think we are very lucky, at least in the Grand Rapids area. We do have a very strong entrepreneurial community. If anyone here would like to start a business, if you have the guts and you're not lazy, you have to have those two things. There's a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of people and organizations, private, nonprofit, that will give you the assistance that you need. We can start from Start Garden, the Small Business Administration, the SBDTC at other universities. There are programs run by the small business organizations, and also we have programs for women, for minorities. You can get help from drawing a business plan to working in places where you work with other entrepreneurs. So don't be afraid, because there is a huge movement going on in Michigan right now, and the reason is because there's a lot of hope that it is the small business community that is going to change the atmosphere and the economy of the country. I work in a lot of, as a judge in a lot of pitch competitions. I work with a lot of organizations that help entrepreneurs, and many of the times what I see is that people, they just don't want to do the work. You know, for you to be a business owner and entrepreneur, you have to be willing to work hard. You have to be willing to take all the no's that you're gonna get. You have to be willing to do the work. If you do the work, you'll get it. I have the opportunity when I decided to get on my own. I was making a six-figure salary, was very successful working for one of the biggest firms in Michigan. English is my second language, and I still, when I decided to do it, I actually talked to Bing at a party about the fact that I was going to leave my job to go on my own, and he was very supportive, and I found a lot of support as soon as I decided to take the jump. So if you are thinking about it, know that there is a lot of resources. You just have to find them. You just have to do the work, and you have to know what you're doing. And when you're starting a business, you're not gonna know what you're doing. So find the right mentors, find the right people that will guide you through the process. When I started my business, I had nothing. I just had a lot of hope and a lot of fire in me. And during my first year, my business revenue was over $1 million on my first year as an attorney. And it has never been below that. We hire over 26 employees full-time in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I serve majority immigrants. So there's always an opportunity to be your own boss, if that's what you want to be. You just have to be willing to do the work. There's a lot of resources in Michigan.
I think the climate is okay for new startups in Michigan. I travel across, both West Michigan and the east side of the state of Michigan. I think for immigrants and I think for underserved communities, I think that there is an additional challenge that individuals who have PhDs may not have to overcome. And sometimes we forget that the majority of new entrepreneurs, especially those who are immigrants, their entry level into the business world is not at those levels. It is at the level of service industries or retail industries. And I think that the way that one can be successful, and I will talk about my own story that way, is that you just need to realize that whatever obstacles and barriers people place before you, because they're going to be there. People will be naysayers to you, and people will tell you that you can't make it. Like my banker at 1972 or 74 said, you ought to work for somebody. And what needs to happen if you are going to look at that and you are not a PhD or you are not even a degreed person, that there are opportunities for entrepreneurship in the state of Michigan. But here's the key. The key is that you begin today to get away from this notion, this old saying that says, about it's not what you know, it's who you know. It doesn't work. I just want you to know that. It's not what you know, it's not who you know. The key is who knows you. In our environment, people do business and hire people they know. You can have everything that you think is going to make you successful, but an employer that has to choose between you and someone they know with lesser credentials will probably choose the person they know. So today, you need to make a commitment. If you want to be an entrepreneur, today you need to make a commitment to forget about, I don't feel comfortable introducing myself to some strange person, right? In a previous conversation earlier this afternoon, I told the group of people, the students there, I said, I want you to have business cards. I don't care if you're a student, carry a business card, get something going. I want you to go, if you have an event like this or other events, and you see, and you know that that person is the CEO of this or whatever, or has a business that is, that is well known and successful, I want you to go to him or her and say, I really want to meet you, and I'll thank you for being at this event. My name is so-and-so. Hand out your business card. You never know that that business card might be your entry into your own business or might be the entry to your professional career. You need to make yourself vulnerable today. Not tomorrow, but today. Find out who you don't know, because you never know that the person you don't know today might be the future for you tomorrow.
And just to add to what being said, it's applicable to my profession and my business. Facebook, people that I have met through Facebook, and the fact that, you know how people connect on social media and they develop a sense of the fact that they know you. I can tell you that I have to dedicate about 2 hours a day to respond to questions via Facebook, and about 90% of the people that reach out to me via Facebook hire my office. So they don't come to me because of advertisement. They all come because either they know me, someone that knows me have sent them to my office, or they know me through social media. So as being said, be vulnerable and make sure that you reach out, not only when you're looking for employment, but also if you're planning to have your own business and develop some sort of business, you're gonna need to have your clients. And that's one way to have clients, even though every industry is different. But it has worked for me, at least in service industry, big time.
Fantastic, thank you. One of the benefits of being in education, whether it's high school or college, is learning from the mistakes of others. If you had to do anything differently, what would it be?
So I think that all of us on this panel will tell you about our failures. We can do a whole session on talking about our failures. But here's where I think we need to redefine failures. Entrepreneurs, at least from my perspective, don't look at failure as being a negative. One of the things that I talk about with other entrepreneurs and upcoming entrepreneurs, I say, failure is the stepping stone to your success. Because if you are successful from the get-go, you will never know how to even grow your business. Because you'll sit there. You learn from your failure. So don't even be afraid of failure, and look at failure as just a part of your educational process. Because you will become a better entrepreneur when you have some failures in your career. I can tell you for the failures that I have, but here's the definition of failure. Because sometimes people say, oh, failure. Well, that means you have to lose everything you got. Well, maybe you do. Sharice talked about his failure, but look what he came out of this failure with, right? And that's all I'm saying is when you want to be an entrepreneur, don't worry about failure. Just learn from it and use it as a stepping stone to your future success.
My biggest failure has been when I started my business, not knowing how to hire people. I quite didn't understand what it means to work in an organization where everybody fit. That is very important. And at the beginning, we had some issues hiring people that they just didn't fit. And when I say didn't fit, they might have had the great background, but they were not used to work in an environment that was such a fast pace and were very much complainers, or in our office, because as I mentioned earlier, we work with a lot of minorities. Sometimes a client will show up with their uncle, their mother, their father, and their children for a consult. And they might be attorneys at other firms, and they're just not used to having children around where they're consulting. There were a lot of issues with hiring that we had at the beginning, and I wish I would have had more experience, or at least dedicated more time in learning how to hire the right candidates. And we learned after a lot of turnovers that we had during the first 2 years, and now we have accomplished a really high retention rate in our office. But it was very hard at the beginning when we needed staff and didn't have a lot of time to actually search for the right candidate. So that has been my biggest failure as an entrepreneur, but I learned quite a bit from it.
One of the things that happens when you are a small business owner is you want to control everything. You know, you become now the person that everybody goes to ask for questions, ask for permission, ask for decisions. And then what happens is as the business starts growing, you become the bottleneck for your business. You can only grow so much because everything has to go through you. And the best thing that I did was I started hiring people that are smarter than me and started to delegate things to them. One of the things that you do is that each of us have our own unique abilities. You know, a unique ability I define is something that we do that we enjoy doing. When we do that, it excites us, it gives us a lot of energy, right? And it could be different thing for different people. Somebody might just enjoy looking at the bills and writing checks and take care of the accounting. And somebody else may get bored, but they're very innovative and they're very creative and they want to do something. So we need to focus on our own ability, our best unique ability. And I decided to delegate everything else to the smart people that I hired. And once I did that, the business grew rapidly. And one of the things I did was I made sure that all of the information that I have as an owner, every employee has that information. So we made sure that we ran our business as an open book. So there's no secrets. The owners have no secrets. Everybody knows about what the revenues are, what the profits are. And then we take the profits and we distribute that among the employees. So everybody has a stake in the business. And even when last year I sold my business, I took $1.5 million of my money and distributed it to all of my employees. And not based on the rank, but based on their length of service. So my administrative assistant, who worked the longest, got $107,000 bonus she walked away with. And so once you trust and once you hire good people and delegate, there is no limit to how high you can grow your business.
Speaking of hiring, what is the least hireable person you've encountered? What is the person who showed up to an interview and you looked at them and said, I'm not going to hire you, and why?
I look at, I'm sorry, I keep coming ahead. You want to start? I like to see that sparkle in that person's eyes. Like I talk about delegation, but one thing I never delegated was hiring. Regardless of whether I'm hiring the highest level person or the lowest level person in the company, I made sure that we never hired a person without me spending a good part of an hour or two with that person. And I always look at that sparkle, that drive in that person, the motivation. More than the resume, I see, I like problem solvers. And I want to see that. I want to see that self-drive, that motivation, and I want to see that self-confident. Because never thought, there's lots of smart people. I only give credit because I almost flunked my high school, and I didn't do very well academically, early part of my life. But I had a strong desire to succeed, and I had a lot of confidence in myself. So sometimes you feel that, as an immigrant, he said something or she looked at me that way because I'm an immigrant. And I never thought that way. I always had a high degree of confidence in my ability. And even if there is discrimination, I was blind to any kind of discrimination. Today, Michigan has never elected someone that looks like me or even talks like me with an accent. And I decided to sell my business and just go into public service. And to do that, you have to really believe in yourself, believe in what you do, and have a boatload of self-confidence.
Hiring is it's definitely one of the most important tasks that you will have as a business owner. Because at the end of the day, your team can make you or break you. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And just like you, I'm very appreciative of my team. We take them out of the country for 5 days, all paid by the firm, on what we call a team retreat. But it's more of an opportunity to take them and do something different with them other than working. The environment that I'm in, it's very intense. You know, sometimes I have a client facing 20 years of life in prison. So there's no room for mistake. Their stakes are very high, and I need the right people working for me. So when we put an ad outside and we decide to interview someone, they already have the credentials. They already have the degree, they already have the experience, they already have what we're looking in paper. But I know you said, what is the thing that I will not hire, what will not look? But I will tell you what is the one thing I look for. I need someone with sense of humor. I need someone that can take the heavy workload that we have, because when I say we had a very heavy workload firm, I really mean it. We're one of the biggest firms in the state. We handle immigration cases. Our office is really busy. It's on the go every single minute. I need someone that can handle all that and still have a sense of humor at the end of the day, that can still give a smile to a client, even in the worst case scenario. I also evaluate other traits such as loyalty, the manners of the person, because we work with very sensitive issues. And believe it or not, I really do not want to work with someone that just can't handle a client bringing you tamales because you don't eat tamales. You know, I need someone to be very sensitive. So those are the traits that I look for when I hire my team. And as I said, my first 2 years, it was really bad and really hard to find the right people. So when you're out there hiring, pay attention to what your business needs and try to hire based on those things.
From a retail perspective side, our requirements for the kinds of talents and educational background is maybe not as high as what Raquel, I'm sure you has a need for. The one thing which, or the characteristic that I'm looking for is attitude. I can teach you the skills in our industry, but I can't teach you how to care. I can't teach you the attitude that that customer is the one that signs your paycheck. So sometimes, you know, for me, it's more like you may be the best person, but if your attitude sucks, you're not going to work for our company, because you're the bad apple in the crate of apples. And so attitude, you know, is really the key character strength for any employee that I want to work in the company that I own. And skill levels, yes, we certainly want some level of skills for the job. But I will tell you, I'll take a lesser skilled person with a great attitude versus a much higher skilled level person with a lousy attitude.
It's interesting that you said that. I'm writing a book, and one of the research I did was when employers are hiring, if they have to choose between attitude and experience, it turned out that most employers will choose by experience. I don't know if that's still happening today. That was a very recent studies, but in my world and almost every area that I have worked with businesses, we do require them to have the knowledge, because if you're going to get hired for a job, you need to know how to do the job, especially in my level where we work with professionals who have Juris Doctors. However, at any time, I will, as being said, the attitude and the personality, for me, it's very, very important, especially in our industry.
For our students who may not have dealt with folks who are from different countries, different cultures a lot, what would you say is something, the one thing that when someone is introduced to you and finds out you're an immigrant, what is one of the strange things they tend to ask you?
I don't get asked
know
strange
what they-
questions. I just get asked questions that I feel they should know, such as, what language do you speak in the Dominican Republic? Is Dominican Republic in the European area? And, you know, I would expect people will have a knowledge of a map and know that we're in the Caribbean and that we speak Spanish. Especially because it's such a destination that they send so much tourists from the United States. There's a lot of tourism going back and forth. But those are normally the things that I'm asked. People always ask me if I'm from Mexico. I love Mexico, but I'm not Mexican. But I'm okay. I take Mexican anytime. It doesn't bother me. But people always assume that I'm Mexican. I don't know the reason why, which is kind of interesting.
I have, I'm 62 years old. I came to this country when I was 24. I became a U.S. citizen in 1988. And I created hundreds of jobs here and adopted this country as my own. And I'm still referred as that Indian guy. So we have, Jennifer Granholm never was called the Canadian lady. But every time there is a newspaper article, they say, oh, we have this running and we have that running and that Indian entrepreneur is running. And I think we just have to look at people as, when will I graduate to be an American?
Aww.
Sometime I wonder.
I don't know. I mean, it's, when I get questions that I think is kind of silly, I have to recognize that maybe it is a serious question and that person really doesn't know the answer to that question and ought to give that person the benefit of the doubt. So everybody looks at me and says, man, that guy's got to be Chinese, right? But did you know, here's the story, right? We immigrated to the United States, arrived in Grand Rapids, Michigan in January 9 of 1960. So, Grand Rapids is a very Dutch town, right? So when we walked off the train, and we were greeted by the church I sponsored of, which is the Christian Reformed Church, a predominantly Dutch denomination. We walked off the train, and we were greeted by people with the last name of De Vos, Van something or other. And guess what? I was speaking Dutch to them, and they couldn't speak Dutch back to me. Now, the reason behind that is because when we fled Indonesia as political refugees, we ended up in the Netherlands for 5.5 years. So you know what I'm saying? So we get asked questions that maybe I think is kind of silly, but they don't know our story. So you got to give them the benefit of the doubt and say, well, let me share with you. See, that's part of the learning process we have, right? And unfortunately, we still live in a society in which no matter how we want to do this, race is still an issue. Let's just be honest, right? I mean, the Indian guy, right? I mean, it's still the issue, right? They reference us as that, right? And they don't reference, the white candidates. You never hear that. So just, for me, it's like, maybe it's silly for me, but I got to give the benefit of the doubt and try to work with that individual and help that individual understand and give them an answer that helps them learn and grow in their own knowledge of people who are different than they are.
We have a question concerning what you feel is important for students to know. So if you could teach a course at Ferris, any course you would want, what would be the topic of the course?
If I would do that, I would teach a course that says the value of every human being. Because you see, none of us in this room will ever gain a measure of success assuming that I can do it by myself. None of you will ever be able to do that. Your success is going to come because you're willing to allow others to come alongside with you and walk alongside with you and help you and lift you up with the knowledge that they have and experiences that they can share with you. Because you see, in my experience, in the years that I've lived in the United States, is that we still, even today, lessen the value of another human being simply because they look different than we are, worship different than we do, have a sexual orientation different than we have. I mean, there's a whole series of things. And because we do that, we impoverish ourselves. We need to teach each other the value of every human being that enriches our lives. If we don't give that, if we don't get to that point, we will continue to have these divisions amongst ourselves. And I think if I was able to do that, President Eisler, I'll be right here to teach that class for you.
I will teach a class called It's Just a Couch. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie American Beauty, but there is a part in that movie that the main characters are kissing, and a cup of wine or a glass of wine or something spills. The woman makes a whole show about the fact that this couch costed her thousands of dollars, and the husband said, it's just a couch. I will teach that because we live in a society where we are so worried about things that really do not matter. We worry about the car that we drive. We worry about the brand of the shoes that we wear. We worry about answering a text message because it cannot wait. There's so many things that we're so worried. We're so worried about making it, about making money, about getting into debt, about things that do not matter. And see people running a whole life working without taking a break to enjoy the fruits of the things that they're working on. You know, we're so busy worrying about things that really don't matter. At the end of the day, it's just a couch. And I think it's important that as you grow as a professional, that you learn how to appreciate the things that really, really matter in life. You know, your family, the woman that you marry or the man that you marry, the person that shares your life with, your family, the things that really matters in life. And I think that we as a society are so worried about things that really do not matter. And I think that I would like to teach a class that emphasizes in that, you know, we are not valuing, when people take vacations, people and some employers do not like that. You know, when someone is starting a business and you decide, you know what, I'm not gonna work weekends, the first answer you get is, how are you gonna run a business if you don't want to work under the weekends? You know, it is okay to take a break. Some things can just wait, and we can work hard without burning ourselves because of the work. So that's something that I would like to encourage everyone, and if I ever had the opportunity to have a class, it will be about that, about finding a balance and an integration of the things that really matter in life.
Yeah, very, very well said. One of the things that are critical, I think, is for all of us to have a balance in our life. What I do every month is I grade myself, and I'm a very tough grader. And I grade myself on not just my financial success. That's only one part of the 6 or 8 different categories I grade myself. How is my relationship with my children, my wife? What am I doing for my health? What am I doing for my society? What am I doing for others? And a lot of times we live our lives where we focus on one area of what we do, and we excel. Even if we excel in one area, whether it's career, there's so many other areas that we flunk. And I think the critical thing is to be able to have a balance in each one of it. And I look at the area that I graded myself the lowest, and I work on that next month to make that area stronger.
Well, we've spoken of students looking for jobs and as employees, and you mentioned mentors. What qualities should someone starting out, either as an entrepreneur or as an employee, be looking for in a mentor?
I think the right mentor, you have to look at making sure that you and the personality of the mentor fit in. But when you're looking for a quality, the first thing I have to tell you is to look for someone that it's doing the things that you want to do in the future, but also that it's available. You know, there's a lot of important people that are in great positions that you would like them to mentor you. But if they don't have the time to dedicate to you, to care about you, to talk to you, then that's not the right mentor. It doesn't matter the credentials that they have. It doesn't matter how important position they have. I encourage you to find a mentor that cares, a mentor that has the time to talk to you, to see what your goals are, and that can help you and guide you through the process of where you are and where you want to be.
Yeah, I'm really not much for mentors, other than my mother, of course. My mother was a strong woman. She never even completed high school. And when my family fell into poverty and I saw her resolve and her strength, and one day we had nothing to eat in the house. We had gone hungry almost for 24 hours. And this woman cooks a big pot of water, boiling water, throws some salt in it, and she found 2 fistfuls of flour, wheat flour, that she put that in there, make a very thick pot of soup, and then she delivers it all. And I remember the 4 sisters and my brother and my dad, we all sat on the floor and ate that, and that was one of the best meals I ever had in my life. So that kind of, and I learned from her frugality, I learned from her pragmatism, and I learned from her how you never give up. And regardless of what the situation is, however hard things get, you take that negativity, the negative energy, and convert that into positive energy. And you fight back, and you succeed. And that's what I learned from my mentor, my mom.
I think for if I was looking for a mentor, and I have had those individuals in my life, I don't think I'm a cat. What I would be looking for, and what I've looked for, is that my mentor has to be a good listener, has to be compassionate, and has to be humble.
Okay.
Our next question is addressed to you as business owners. As a young female in a male-dominated industry, I find myself often pushed to the side or underestimated. Do you have insights on how to combat that without creating a hostile or uncomfortable environment?
Well, no one can make you feel bad if you don't let them. It all needs to be within yourself, that you never accept anything but the best. You have this huge amount of confidence in yourself. And I don't see discrimination. I ignore that because I will not let that influence my mood or my behavior. I want to stay positive, and if I see something that isn't right, I'll walk away from that and just believe in myself.
I'm a woman, I'm a business owner, and a professional that is dominated by men. I take a seat on the table. They're not going to give it to you. You have to fight for it. If you have to create an environment where they will feel hostile, it is okay. They will deal with it. The reality is that if you're a woman, you will have some issues that you will have to overcome in your profession, especially as a business owner. If you work in an area where I walk in what is called a pre-trial, and I have a room full of 20 white men. Many times, I am the only woman. Sometimes there's 2 of us, okay? So do I notice? Yes. Do they notice? Absolutely not. They have no idea that that is happening. They joke around, some jokes that sometimes I can't relate to them. I don't play basketball. I don't watch the same things that they do. When I get together with other attorneys in the same room, oh, how are your kids? Oh, yeah, you know, we do that, and it will happen to you. So you just have to always take a seat on the table. I strongly recommend you to read. There's a lot of books lately. I will not remember how to say her name, but she is, I believe, the FCO for Facebook. She wrote a book called Lean In, and there's other books that has been written in response to that because there is a real issue about women career and how it's all that being put together, especially in the industries in California and all the tech industry, but it happens everywhere. So you do have to, you have to be aware of that, but you have to overcome that. If you do not do that, you will find yourself not having a seat on the table. Do not let your gender affect your success. You do have to work towards it, and as I said, you just have to take a seat on the table.
Agree.
It is a male privilege to think that there is no discrimination when it comes to gender. There is discrimination when it comes to gender. The way, and I can't speak for a women business owner. What I can tell you is that there has been times, and especially as old as I am, I lived through the 60s and the 70s. And I know that I was also the only one that is not white in most rooms, in most boardrooms, or in most meetings. Or, I remember I was a business owner, and yet when a salesman comes into my shop and sees a white employee, they go to that person and thinking that he's the owner of the company. So the response is not to be angry. I mean, to be angry in a positive way, because you shouldn't have to be dealing with that. None of us should be dealing with that, but we are dealing with it. Let's be honest about that. But the way to deal with that is to be better prepared than every person in that room. You know the answers. You don't give flippant answers. You know the data. You know all these things because you're very well prepared. And sometimes the privilege of men is that they don't always have to be prepared. And I'm just saying to all of us is that we are only going to help each other if we are all prepared, whether we're male or female. So I think that the question is really a critically important question. And I can't answer it. Raquel knows how to answer it much better than I can. But I can tell you the only thing I can say to the person who's asking the question is, it's real. Your feelings are real. It should not be discounted. But here's the way to respond to it. Don't be unprepared. Be prepared to answer the issues that you're there for, and do it with facts and data. And guess what? You will probably have more information that the other people will learn from in that room, and they will then begin to recognize the value that you bring, not as a woman, but the value you bring because you are very well prepared.
Thank you. So I remember hearing a joke as a preface to the next question many years ago from a colleague of mine who was from Europe, and the joke went like this. What do you call a person who can speak 2 languages? Bilingual. What do you call a person who can speak 3 languages? Trilingual. What do you call a person who can speak 1 language? American. So how important is it in the current business climate as an entrepreneur to be able to speak another language?
I think language has culture built into it. And when I grew up, I studied in Marathi, language spoken in India, the part where Mumbai is. And with that language came a lot of the poetry and the arts and the literature that I really enjoyed. I studied in Marathi because I was poor enough that I couldn't go to the English media school. Many of my friends who went to the English medium school and only studied in English, lost out on the rich poetry and the rich literature and the theater, that all of that. And obviously, I couldn't speak English very well. And when I started teaching undergraduates, as a part of my PhD program, I got ridiculed all the time, and people had trouble understanding me. But again, I did not let that bother me, and I kept improving and kept working on it. And then in the end of my PhD program, I was given an award, an outstanding teaching assistant, among all kind of teaching assistants. So again, a lot of the discrimination is something that you have to let go of that and not worry about, oh, I'm a woman, I'm a foreigner, I'm a short guy, whatever. A lot of times I'm in a meeting and there are 19 other people. I don't notice that they were all white. When I talk to a tall, 7-foot tall man, I don't look at that as I'm short. Some of it is what's been portrayed on you. There is only so much you can do about how people's attitudes, people's behavior towards you. It's all what's inside you and what are you going to believe.
Thank you. But do you find it beneficial in your business dealings to be able to have a second language?
Not necessarily in my business, but it enriched my life. It broadened my horizons, it enriched my life. And I lived in 2 states within India, and those 2 states spoke different languages. So I was able to learn languages of each. Then I learned the national languages, Hindi, and of course English. So I'm fluent in 4 languages, and I understand 2 other languages. So essentially, I understand 6. I think every language that you learn, it just enriches your life.
Thank you.
There's a quote by Warren Buffett that says that the more you know, the more you'll earn. I have found that having 2 languages have been instrumental in my career. 90% of my clients speak Spanish. Do I believe that for you to be successful, you need to have 2 languages? No, it depends on the industry you are in. You might be very successful without speaking more than 1 language. However, if you have the opportunity to study abroad and learn other languages, I don't see that as a negative. It will always help you to do more. It will always help you to learn more. It will always help you to be able to communicate more with other people that otherwise you wouldn't be able to communicate. And it will also allow you to help and work with other people and serve other areas that you probably would not have the opportunity if you don't speak the language. So if you, for instance, you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or have a business that serve certain public, if you speak 2 languages and one of those, you can serve those communities that other people will not be able to serve. So do I see it as something that will affect you as a business owner in your business if you don't speak 2 languages? No. But will it help you do way better? Absolutely, I believe so.
And I think that I agree with Raquel. I think that even if you don't have the ability to have, or bilingual, you can always hire people who can help you with that, right? I think it's in a global economy. Well, let me talk about my own business. That's the only thing I can share with you. So we have a growing Hispanic population. So we hire people who can answer calls in the Hispanic language, right? Not only because they can speak it, it's because they also understand the culture. Because, for example, this is a real example of what in our industry, we do a lot of funeral work. Flowers have meanings and different meanings in different cultures. Don't send white flowers to an Asian family because it's the flower that signifies death. So if you don't have someone that understands the culture, you will make mistakes that you will then have to pay for and may not ever to be able to overcome. We had an instance several years ago in which a Native American family came into our store. Their patriarch passed away. They came in with feathers and stones and said, will you incorporate that into the casket spray. I was lucky enough to have a Native American woman from the Cherokee tradition who understood what they wanted. If I didn't, I would have screwed up that order so bad, and I would have offended them to the point where they probably will never come back to the store. Language is important. In a global economy, having different, if you have the ability to learn more than the English language, absolutely. But some of us can't do that. Be smart, like Therese said, I hire the best. You can do that. But more important, as the owner or as the leader of your organization, you better understand the value of cross-cultural communications and understanding. You want to be successful in today's global economy. If you think that your way is the only way, you will lose. Surround yourself with good people. If you don't understand the cross-cultural communication, if you don't understand the value of diversity and inclusion, figure out how you can find somebody that can help you get there. Because in today's global economy, if you don't understand that, I believe that you will not be able to be successful.
Thank you. As we heard from our president and provost, the population of Michigan is declining. We need employees, and as you have mentioned in some earlier responses, bringing people to Michigan may be the way to do that. Do you find that the current immigration climate in the U.S. is affecting the entrepreneurial climate and your ability to hire quality employees?
I think there is some fear about the uncertainty about immigration policies, and that has created some fear among some of the immigrants, that the uncertainty, because sometimes if your visa doesn't get extended, your status expires, and within weeks you may have to leave the country, and you have children in school and issues. So the current environment about uncertainty is making immigrants very uncomfortable. And these are people that are contributing to our economy, they're contributing to our society. And I think our greatness, the country is great because we are a country of immigrants. And we should not forget that. And we should welcome anyone who wants to contribute to America's success, in my mind, is an American. And we should welcome them with open arms.
So here's some statistics that you may or may not know. The immigration policy that we are hearing are being proposed is going to absolutely devastate our economy. But more than that, it's going to be an impoverishing of our own quality of life. In terms of the Hispanic Asian population, which is the immigrant population that we're talking about, is in the state of Michigan, $21.6 billion is created through those two population groups, both foreign-born and native-born populations in that community. The Arab American population in the state of Michigan, the most recent one that I've seen, generates approximately $7.7 billion of revenues through their work and businesses and things like that. Pay over $540 million in state and local taxes. Just think about that. If we do what we're hearing might happen, and we limit and we change the immigration policy to what is being discussed, those opportunities for you and I, if we are not part of those demographics, we will impoverish our lives. How will you replace $544 million in state and local taxes that help you have a quality of life from the Arab American community that has been portrayed as being this? Think about that, right? And I'm just saying to you, if you think about the the statistics of the contributions that immigrants have, I think it's like 41, 42% of the top 500 Fortune companies were started by an immigrant or an child of an immigrant. 1 out of 10 American is employed by an immigrant-owned business in the United States. Reduce all those things by what's being talked about in Washington, D.C. Please understand that you are now willing, and you're supporting that, you are willing to lower your quality of life. Because you see, we're losing all those. And if you think that this is not true, talk to the international student body population in the state of Michigan is roughly 30,000. You know how much revenue they bring to the state of Michigan? $1.03 billion. You know what's happening today because of the conversation that Cherie's talking about, the fear within the immigrant communities that are saying, we're going to Canada. The international student body population is shrinking. And it's really shrinking the most in the master's and PhD programs. I'm just saying, folks, let's figure out how to learn and educate ourselves about the value that immigrants and others have brought to this nation. And let's make sure that we don't impoverish ourselves by not speaking up against the kinds of things that's being discussed in our Washington, D.C. leadership. That's the real stuff. That's the real stuff. We willing to lose that? International students, $1.03 billion that comes through the state revenues and into the state. We willing to lose that? Besides losing the economic power, we're also losing the brain power. And we have to start getting ourselves familiar with what's really happening when we allow this kinds of conversation to occur and we're not challenging it. Do you know the amount of millions of dollars that we are losing out on simply because we underutilize the skills and the talents of immigrants that have come to the United States? One of the, I don't know if it's a joke, but one of the things that we talk about is we don't want the most educated taxi cab drivers in the state of Michigan. We don't want the most educated wait staff. Not that those are minimal jobs, they're important jobs. Every job is important for our quality of life, for every one of us. But that's what's happening. And we have to find a way to help everyone understand the value that every person brings, including immigrants, to this country, and how they enrich our lives and not impoverish our lives. The crazy notion that immigrants take away jobs from Americans. In the state of Michigan, we have over 100,000 jobs being unfilled. It's the reality. It's the reality. It is a crazy conversation that we're having. It's not happening. It's not true. We all have an opportunity. But we got to remember, we got to know our facts, and we got to know what's going on. And we can't just live on sound bites. We have to stand up, because every one of us, I don't care if you're, I don't know what the terminology is, immigrant, non-immigrant, whatever it is, but every one of us is going to be impacted what happens to my next door neighbor. Every one of us.
Michigan has between a 6 to 7% population that is immigrant. And I will strongly encourage all of you, when you have a chance, there's a movie called A Day Without an Immigrant. It's very old. It's been out for over 10 years. And it's kind of a parody. They're just making fun of the issue. But the reality is that when this person wakes up, there's no immigrants. And they go from the first time of the day, they went to eat at the breakfast at the cafeteria they normally go, and there's no one to serve them. There's no waitresses. There's no one making their coffees. The people that works in the back of the restaurants, they're no longer there. Then they go back to the people who picks up our potatoes, our tomatoes, our strawberries, and all the farm workers. There's no one picking up the fruits anymore. But we also talk about in the movie when they go to classrooms, you know, other kids are not in the classroom. Some of the teachers are gone. If you go to the doctors, your doctors who are immigrants are not there. And that is a reality. Could it happen? It will take a while, but it could if we continue in the negative narrative that we are seeing. But the reality is that the United States is as successful as it is because there's a lot of people working together. You know, sometimes our circles are so small that we don't see outside of that circle, but the reality is that there's a lot of moving pieces happening, and a lot of them are being moved by immigrants. And we have seen in the news how things are being portrayed. You know, as in every aspect of life, have there been people that have done what they shouldn't be doing? Of course. But to speak in general terms that immigrants are bad for our communities it's not right. As Ben just gave you a lot of statistic in regards to the taxes and the amount of money that they bring to our economy, you know, the Latino population, we have one of the most progressive buying power in the United States at this point, and it's only continuing growing, and it's happening in all of the communities. So I encourage you to have an open mind. When people, I really take at heart when people say, oh, they're taking our jobs. No, we're not. I created my own job, and I created jobs for over 30 employees, and also Bank, and also Shri. So no, there's positions for everyone, there's jobs for everyone. We work really hard, and I don't like the narrative, the generalized when it comes to the immigrants. We are making a difference in our communities. We are all working hard, and we support each other big time because there's a lot of pain in our communities. You know, right now, I was talking to Bing earlier. I'm in my office where there's a lot of crying all the time because of how families are being set apart, how people are being deported. Now they're even being deported without having committed any crimes in the United States. You know, just because they're here undocumented. People that have worked their whole life here, and sometimes, you know, there's not a procedure for them to stay. So the immigrants do make a difference in the lifestyle that we have. We all have a role in life that we need to do, and I encourage you to continue supporting the immigrant communities and to learn more about what we do and who we are, not only the one or two communities, you know, including all the immigrants community from different countries, not just the Mexican community that is being attacked so heavily lately, and the Middle Eastern communities.
Thank you. So the next question is one that I am afraid to ask, but it's a valid question. Is college a necessity in our society today?
Could you repeat that?
Is a college degree a necessity in our society today?
No, absolutely not. Well, there used to be, and I'm saying that in a college, but you know, I don't think so. I think sometimes we look at college-educated people and we look down upon others. And we need all kinds of people and jobs. So I don't think four-year college is for everyone. Remember the days where you could get out of high school, learn some trade skills, and go get a job in an auto factory and live a pretty good life? And we are not able to do that today. What's the guy who owns Facebook? He never completed college. Did Bill Gates completed college? I think the president and the deans are looking at me a little strangely here. But I think really it's your passion. It's what's in your heart, what's your passion. And your passion, maybe you want to be an electrician, or you may want to do some community work, whatever. But I think you should follow your passion. And sometimes some things you can learn in college, and a lot of things you don't learn in college. And when you live your life in a real world, sometimes you learn newer, different things. And so I think I stayed in college too long, and I got too many degrees. I also got an MBA, as if that was not enough. But I think you should pursue your passion.
I'm team college, and I'm going to tell you why. I come from a family where my parents are college educated. My siblings all are college educated. So I have this conversation quite often with my husband, especially because we have kids that are in college, what career they should choose, whether they should drop school and follow something else. And we both come to the conclusion over time that there's some skills that you gain when you're in college that you just can't get outside. Can you be a Facebook? Yes. How many Facebook guys we have? We have one. There's a more secure path to success in life when you go to college. That's how I see it. I know that there is a huge movement about dropping college, not going to college because it's not necessary. Is it necessary for a lot of other things in life? Absolutely not. But if you want to be at least my doctor, you better have gone to college, and you better know what you're doing. If you want to be an attorney, there's some careers that do require you to go through formal education. It's a very personal decision. I don't think that it needs, for you to be successful, you don't need to have it. But as I said, I encourage my kids to go to college. I come from a family that is college educated. All my siblings are college educated, and I hope that all of our 3 kids will graduate from college. I think it's important. I think that, at least for me, when I went to law school, we used the Socratic method. I learned how to think in a different way that I don't think I would have learned if I would have not gone to college.
The question that to ask is maybe, are colleges teaching what children or students need to be successful in their life? And are we pragmatic enough? Are we practical enough? And are we focused on the right things?
And then I will answer that you can't just put all the teaching on the part of the college. The college are to fit. Their goal and their role is to just do one part of the job. You have to be out there. You have to also learn outside of the box. So we can't just put all the weight on the colleges to educate our children and our future. We also have, the churches, the communities. We have our families. What you learn in college is just one part of it. We are a full, complete picture. And I can tell, have you guys seen the movie, what's the movie that was in India, of this guy who answered all these questions that he became so successful based on the experiences that he had?
Oh, the Slumdog?
Yeah, that one. Through life, you see? The things that you learn in life are part of your learning. The experiences, when you find yourself lost, like I was in Pisa. I just found myself in Pisa that I missed my 10:30 last train of the day. We have 4 hours to figure out how to get to Florence, which is almost 2 hours away from where we were. And the reality is that you have to bring to the table everything that you learn everywhere. You can't just put college to be your only resource. That's why they offer studying abroad programs. That's why they offer internships. That's why they offer other things for you to get the education that you need to be a more complete human being.
But a lot of times what you learn in college, I think we should go take maybe 1,000 people, see what they majored in college, and then find out what they did rest of their life. And you'll find that 60-70% of those people are doing something completely other than what they learn in college.
But that's not a negative part. That just means that they learned that they didn't want to do that when in college.
I think they should be able to choose a more indirect interest of what their passion is.
I find that when people are young, we have an idea what we want to do. And as we grow as a person. Our skills, our knowledge, the things that I liked when I was 10 years old, I definitely do not like now. The things that I liked 5 years ago are now the things that I like now. So as we grow as human beings, as a professional, as business owner, as person, even when we get married, the things that we learn in life, It's what's going to guide us as who we're going to be at the end of the day. You know, even if you go to college and you study to be whatever, and later on you discover that you like something else, go for it. You guys know who Michael Jordan is?
Yeah.
Let me remind you that he's one of the best basketball players in history, and he dropped that to be a baseball player.
Oh, I thought it was a philosophy major.
No. You know, after being so successful in his career as a basketball player, one day he decided, you know what? I'm going to play baseball. He sucked at it. He was horrible, and he went back. So it is okay to go through one path and change that path. You know, whether college is for you or not, I guess all of you like college because you're here, you know, it's not the answer to what you're going to do 30 years from now. Trust me about that. Life changes. You will move around. You know, you mentioned, I think you were saying, be the water. Was that you? You know, you're going to be the water. You find your way in life as to who you're going to be. And I can guarantee you, the person you are today is not the person you're going to be tomorrow, and certainly not the person that you're going to be in 10 years.
All right, everybody's staying in college.
See, that's what happened when you put a lawyer here. We can't just shut up.
Now we have a question from a business student who wants to get right to the point. Okay, beyond a college degree, what do you feel is important? What do you feel is the most important thing for our generation to have on our resumes? And what do you feel would make us stand out? What would make them stand out as a candidate? Because, of course, when you get to the interview, you are looking for the person who has passion, the person who has energy, the person who has drive, the person who has humor, but you have to make it to the interview. What gets you there? What are you looking for on the resume beyond just the college degree?
I think Bing hasn't spoken for a while, so.
I felt like a tennis referee and going this way, and they all had good points. So, you know, for me, it's like, okay, I don't need to say anything.
No.
You know, for me, it's if I'm going to look at a resume, I want to know what you have done to enrich another person's life. Because if you are able to do that, then I know that you will do the same thing for my company.
I think it's also based on the industry. As I mentioned earlier, to get an interview with me, you have to have in paper, you must look good. And I liked one-page resume, and I just want to know what school you went, when did you graduate, what you have done. I want to know your GPA if you're just someone who are still in your last years of college or you are a recent grad. So I think it depends on the industry, what we're looking for. I do find very, very valuable when I read a resume, when I get a little bit about the person who you are. I don't know if you saw my bio outside. Yeah, all the things about my professional and how at the end, I talk a little bit about me as a person. And I recall when I was younger, reading other people's bio, other professionals. And I always wonder, why do I care who you're married to? Why do I care what do you do in your free time? And as I grow older, I do care about those things. I want to know who you are as a person. Most people will not include that in a resume because it's not the standard. So generally to get to the interview in my office and in the industry that I'm in is all based on what you did when you were in college or where you have worked. You know, I like to see people that has a variety of work experience. I like to see people that have been involved in things other than just a job and going to school. Like I like to see if they were part of a law review, part of certain organizations.
I like to see people that come prepared and know about what my company is, what we do, what are recent issues we had, what was the last press release that my company released and talked. And that is so easy to do with internet, and you can do some searching and find so much information. And if you can, in the conversation, communicate that, it is so much more impressive than, and I've said to people, oh, what have you done to prepare for this interview? And sometimes they tell me, oh, I know all about it. I said, if you were selling to me about what my company does, sell it to me. Tell me what this company does. And I find so many times people don't take that minimum 10, 20, 30 minutes to do enough research to come in. They should really know everything about the company.
Okay.
So for us, one of the things that we started to look at is not only the contributions that they make, because you know what? No one's going to apply for a job that they know they're not prepared to do. So you always have to make the decision, is the resume correct? Is the law degree or the degrees that they are fit with what your requirements are? But you know what we've done in our, so I'm in the floral industry, so it's not like they have to be, you know, the Einsteins of the world, but they have to be creative, right? They have to know, I mean, an artist, it's amazing. You know, I have so much respect for artists. They can look at a blank canvas and they see the finished product, and I'm thinking, how the heck do you see that, right? They can, a floral designer can see a vase and they'll know what the finished product should look like. I can't. But you know what we've done? We aren't even hiring florists. I mean, we have an opportunity to hire for a floral design position. We don't require you to be a florist designer. We have hired our latest hires were 2 Kendall graduates because we're looking for an artist. We can teach the other stuff. We're looking for someone that's creative and knows how to get from this blank space to this finished product. So sometimes it is not for, at least in our industry, and I'm only talking about the industry that I'm in, we decided that sometimes it is better for us to hire someone like a Kendall graduate versus someone who graduated from a floral design school. Or someone that has experience. Because sometimes people with experience, we have to break down their lousy experience. So we'd rather start with a blank canvas, you know, and have that person train under our vice president of designs to match what we need in our organization.
Well, I will start this one with our attorney, because I'm certain you also see business startups and businesses ending. What are common mistakes do you see or have you seen when starting a business?
Mistakes?
Mistakes.
I will say the number one mistake I see, it's fake projections. When I say fake projections, what that means is when someone is starting a business, they believe they're going to make a lot of money right away. They believe things are going to be so easy right away. And that idea, it's so against everything that I know about business. It's not easy, and it's hard to make the money when you're starting. I work with an organization in Grand Rapids, 2 of them, one called Spring GR, another one called GROW, which is Grand Rapids Opportunity for Women. And we work with a lot of wannabe entrepreneurs. Some of them have very strong ideas. They've done a lot of research. They know exactly what they're going to do. They have a great path. But others, their expectations are unrealistic. You know, it is very hard to make a profit in a business when you're starting in your first year, in your second year. And I think that the first mistake I see with entrepreneurs is that they don't have realistic expectations. Number one. Number two, they're undercapitalized. You know, you just can't start a business with $100. That's a great title for a book. That's a great story to say. I started with $100. But the reality is that no business can start with $100 and be successful if they don't have the money to handle the cost of the business for the next couple of months. That's just not true. Yeah, we all start with, I started my business with $10 that I paid for a domain, okay? But there were other expenses in addition to that. So those are the main 2 things. Unrealistic expectations, number one, and number 2, they do not have the correct numbers to start the business from the financial aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. The other part that I would suggest that is sometimes the failures are the unrealistic expectation. But I think sometimes what I've seen some business fail is because the business entrepreneur is not willing to sacrifice. I mean, there's just, like Raquel says, it's not going to be where the next day you're going to take out a $100,000 salary. I mean, the sacrifices that entrepreneurs have to make. There is no such thing as overnight success, folks. None like that at all. And so commitment and sacrifice is sometimes lacking in some entrepreneurs, and I think that's caused the failure of their ideas as well.
And don't be afraid to start small. You know, I had the opportunity to work with a colleague of mine who started the business for another law firm. And when I went to her office, I was in shock to see how amazing furniture, how wonderful decoration the attorney had. And I was like, wow. And she said, yeah, I used my credit card, spent $15,000 buying all this, I'm ready for business. When I started my business, all my furniture was donated by my former employer, Warner Norcross and Judd. I bought a big building that was almost 6,000 square foot, and I didn't have furniture. And they donated every piece of furniture. They were all used, and I still have about 90% of that furniture today, 7 years later. And I can't stand the idea of spending $100,000 to refurnish things that I use perfectly and that does not increase the benefits that I provide to my clients. So knowing how to spend your money and work through it, it's very important.
Yeah. Understanding the marketplace. It's not about what you want to develop. It's about what is need. What's the need in the marketplace? What are the clients looking for? What are some problems that need solving? And understand that, and then propose a solution to that. Before I forget, I want to also let all of you know that I wrote a memoir in 2009. I have a few copies of my memoir here. They are complimentary. So if you want to take one when you leave, welcome to. My staff will have some copies, and you're welcome to read.
Thank you. So this next one, because you're all entrepreneurs, you've all had the opportunity to work for someone else. So I'm going to read it as written. What made you pursue a career as a business leader and not just work for the man?
Well, I was working in a company that wasn't growing. It was a 300 million revenue company, and I was very ambitious. And I went and made a case to my boss that I should be promoted, and he said, over my dead body. And so it was the ambition, and then sometimes the bureaucracy in the company. I would invent some technology, and then because it was invented in one department and that department head didn't get along with somebody else, that technology will not go anywhere. And when I saw that, I felt, I want to control this. I want to be in an environment where what I do matters and makes a difference.
Thank you. Bing?
Wow. I think for me it was, I've always had this dream of creating a family-owned business where, it could be passed on to my children or my grandchildren. And, and I'm finding out that maybe that might not be the best, because you know how hard it is to transition a family business. I mean, you got kids that are out there. They all want different things, right? So, but I think that's what caused me to do that. But I think the other part of it is that you may want to consider in terms of your own decision of whether you want to be an entrepreneur or work and for someone else is, what are your goals? What are your goals that you want? I was talking to someone. I said, I don't think I could accumulate the security, the financial security I had if I was working for someone. But I would have loved, when I first started out my business, I would have loved the security of a secure paycheck, every week. So it all depends on what your goals are for yourself in your own life. And I think mine was to create a family business and create security for my family.
In my case, I wanted to control my schedule. That was my why. My why was I really wanted to have more control of my hours, being able to, the time that I started my career, I already had a daughter, and I remember going to, how difficult it was for me to leave my office to go to her school activities that were during work hours. At that time, I was working at one of the best firms in Michigan, very supportive of women professionals. I love the place, but I still felt that I needed to be there. I needed to do my hours, and I didn't have control of my schedule. So for me, my why was I wanted to be able to control my schedule. And after being in business for almost 8 years on my own, I successfully have been able to integrate every part of me that I love about my life as part of my profession, my career, my business. One of the things that I do and encourage a lot of business owners to take time off. I know a lot of business owners that they just work every day and they don't take a break. I know I take that to the extreme. Last year I took 80 days off just to travel the world at different times. And for the first time I was gone for a month in my office. And I really thought it was going to be a chaos. Everybody was like, how are you going to be gone from us? I'm like, you know, my business partner had a baby, and she was gone for 3 months for maternity leave, and nothing happened. So my baby was to go to Africa. So I was able to pull it off, and I continue to make sure that even though I work very hard, even though my business is growing, I have a strong responsibility for my clients and my team. I also have a responsibility to me, my husband, my kids, and our own personal goals. And being in the office every day, every hour, affects all of the personal goals that we have.
Thank you all very much. It is that time to start wrapping it up. So I would like to give you each a moment to give a final thought. I'd like to start on the far end. Shri, would you like to give a final thought and a wrap up on this?
Well, this has been a pleasure being here and having a dialogue. I know you came here for a credit hour, but I hope you got more than the credit hour and more. I think we need to, today we have too much of a divide between the haves and the have-nots, and we really need to be a more of an inclusive society in every sense of the word. And I think we need to go beyond the accents and the color of our skins and the religion we preach. We just need to look at as people at different level of the economic ladder. And I think our goal ought to be empowering people to move. And a country as successful as we are, nobody should be living under poverty. And it hurts me to see 20% of our children live in poverty today. 40% of the African American kids live in poverty. And I think we have to make this work for all of us. We need to make this an inclusive society in every sense of the word.
Thank you. Bing, would you like a final thought?
Well, first of all, thank you, President Eisler and the team here at Ferris State University. Thank you, Catherine, for reaching out and giving me the honor of being part of this great panel. You know, I'm so excited to see this many students and faculty members here. I don't know if I have any advice for you. You know what needs to be done. You have the skills, you have the abilities to do and make this, make your life better, and in so doing, you're going to make my life better. You know, I need your Social Security payments, folks. But seriously, I am absolutely excited. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that what you will take away from here is that our opportunities, your opportunities, is going to be aligned with the opportunities of other people. If you are a barrier to those opportunities for other people, you will also be your own barrier to your own opportunities. And I hope that that is the message that you heard from us today. All of us have gotten to where we are, not because we did it on our own. All of us have gotten to be where we are because other people cared about us and helped us, grow and whatever that means in our own particular lives. So thank you for being here, and love having this conversation with you.
Thank you.
I would like to close with a quote that I like a lot that says that life doesn't have to be the way your life doesn't have to be the way others expect it to be. That means that, all of us have a different way of thinking, different ways of doing things. Don't be afraid of going the other route. Don't be afraid of putting everything on the table. Every time that I have taken risks in my life has paid off so nicely that I always wonder why it took me so long to sometimes make those moves. But it is okay to wait. It is okay to do it later. It's okay to do it now. It is okay to try. It's okay to not like it. It's okay to have failures on your way. Your life doesn't have to be the way others expect it to be. Give it a shot at the things you like. Try things. Change careers. Do whatever you want to do. Whatever you do, just do not break the law. Learn how to say no. Seriously, do not break the law. Learn how to say no to things that will get you in trouble, and your life will take the right route at some point. The difference between someone to be very successful or not, it's many times whether they're in jail or in prison or not. So please always be very conscious about being responsible when it comes to the laws that we have to follow, because you don't want to have your future tainted because of a conviction.
Thank you all very much. I believe.
Wow, how about giving them a round of applause?